The ground under my feet cracked open before I even heard the sound. I was running across the black glass fields behind Long Ridge Station when the whole gully dropped a foot to my left, and a cry rose up from the broken rock, sharp and desperate, like something small was dying down there. I did not stop to think about the rules. I did not stop to think about the treaty, or the warnings, or the fact that every single person on this planet had told me, again and again, to stay away from the roosting cliffs, no matter what I heard or saw. I just ran toward the sound. My name is Wes. I was 11 years old that year, living with my father in a human station, tucked under the shadow of a mountain that belonged to dragons. Real dragons. Not the kind from old stories. These were alien creatures the size of transport ships, with wings that blocked out the sun, and eyes that glowed like small suns themselves. My father worked here mapping the valley for a survey program, and in exchange, the dragons let a few hundred of us live on their land, as long as we followed one law above every other law. Never go near a hatchling. Never touch an egg. Never interfere with dragon young for any reason, no matter what. I broke that law within the first 10 seconds of reaching the gully. A young dragon, barely bigger than a large dog, was trapped under a shelf of black volcanic glass that had slid down during the tremor. Its wings were folded wrong, wet and shaking, and its scales shimmered a strange color between purple and storm gray. Its eyes were wide and streaming with something that was not quite tears, but did the same job tears do. It screamed again, and the sound hit something deep in my chest that I did not know I had. I should have turned around right there. I knew what would happen if a kin guard found me standing over an injured hatchling. Dragon guards did not ask questions first. They protected their young before anything else, and a stranger near a wounded hatchling would look like exactly what the law was designed to prevent. I did not turn around. The glass shelf pinning its leg was thin, but sharp enough to cut through skin in a second if I pulled the wrong way. I remembered something my father once told me about freeing a stuck drone rotor from thick brush. Never yank the whole thing at once. Find where the weight is actually resting, then take it away piece by piece. I grabbed a flat stone from the ground and used it to wedge under one corner of the glass, taking pressure off slowly, instead of trying to lift the whole slab in one motion. I wrapped my jacket around my hands so the sharp edges would not slice through my palms. The hatchling thrashed under me, screaming louder now that something new was touching it, and at one point, it snapped its jaw down on my forearm hard enough to draw blood. I did not pull away. I kept working. It took maybe 6 minutes. It felt like an hour. My hands were shaking by the time the last piece of glass slid free, and the hatchling's leg came loose from under the rock. It did not run. That was the strange part. A wild creature freed from pain should bolt the moment it is able to move. Instead, it collapsed sideways against me, its whole body trembling, and it made a low sound from somewhere deep in its chest, almost like a purr, but heavier, rougher, like stone grinding against stone in a slow, steady rhythm. I did not know what that sound meant yet. I only knew that it felt warm and strange and important, and I found myself sitting there in the gully with a bleeding arm, letting a baby dragon lean its full weight against my side while the light outside started to fade. Then the sky went dark in a different way, not the slow dark of evening. A sudden shadow, wide enough to swallow the whole gully, moving fast. The wing beat that followed nearly knocked me flat. A massive dragon landed just beyond the edge of the gully, its scales black and copper, its body easily large enough to crush the station where I lived without much effort. Its eyes locked onto me the instant it touched down, molten and gold, with a narrow dark line running down the center like a crack in hot metal. This was a kin guard. I had only seen them from a distance before, flying high over the ridge, never this close, never this angry. For one long moment, nothing happened. The guard did not move. I did not move. The hatchling pressed itself tighter against my side, and I remember thinking, with a strange kind of calm that only comes when fear has gone past the point of being useful, that this was probably how my story ended. Then the guard's gaze shifted from me to the hatchling, and something changed in the air. Instead of running toward its guardian the way any frightened creature should, the hatchling stayed exactly where it was, pressed against a human boy, and it let out that same rough, rhythmic sound again, louder this time, aimed directly at the guard. I did not understand the meaning of it in that moment. I only understood it later, after I had time to learn. That sound is called a bond call. Dragons do not make it for strangers. They make it for the ones who saved them. The guard lowered its enormous head, slow and careful, until one huge golden eye was level with my face. Heat rolled off its body like an open furnace, and I could feel my own heartbeat pounding in my ears louder than anything else in the world. A voice arrived in my chest, not through my ears, but through some pressure behind my ribs, heavy with meaning I somehow understood without hearing a single spoken word. Human, explain yourself. My voice cracked when I tried to answer. I told it about the tremor, about the sound I heard, about the glass shelf and the trapped leg, and how I could not just leave a screaming creature to die under a pile of rock, even if I knew I was breaking the biggest law on this entire planet. I kept apologizing between sentences, saying I was sorry, saying I knew I was not supposed to be there, saying I did not mean to break anything. I just could not walk away from that sound. The guard went silent for a long stretch of time, long enough that I started to believe the silence itself was the answer, and not a good one. Then it did something I had no way to prepare for. It lowered its huge head the rest of the way down until its scaled forehead touched the ground in front of me. A gesture I later learned was reserved only for clan elders, or for outsiders, who had done something the whole clan considered too important to ignore. "You are called Wes," the voice said, and I remember feeling a cold shiver at the fact that it already knew my name before I had said it. "You are named Nest Friend now. Every dragon on this ridge will know your scent and your name before the sun rises again. You will not be harmed on Skytalon ground. You will not go hungry on Skytalon ground. This is not kindness. This is law, older than any treaty your people signed, older than the station where you sleep." I did not fully understand what any of that meant. I was 11 years old, sitting in a gully with a bleeding arm and a baby dragon curled against my side, and mostly what I understood was that I was not about to be hurt, which felt like the best possible outcome of a day that had gone completely off the rails. I understood it better the next morning. I walked out of the station at sunrise, still tired, still sore, expecting a quiet walk to breakfast like any other day. Instead, every single person outside stopped moving the moment they saw me. Human workers froze mid-step. Dragons resting along the ridge lifted their heads all at once, turning toward me in a slow wave that spread across the whole mountain. Word had traveled faster than I thought possible, carried wing to wing across the entire ridge overnight, the way news moves through a species that speaks without needing wires or screens. My father found me standing there, stunned, and I will never forget the look on his face, somewhere between terror and disbelief. He grabbed my arm, checked the bite mark from the hatchling, and demanded to know exactly what had happened. I told him everything, and for a long moment, he did not say a single word. He just stared at the ridge, at the dragons watching us from a distance, and then back at me. That was only the beginning. Over the following weeks, I learned that the guard's promise was not just words spoken in a moment of gratitude. It was treated as something close to sacred among the dragons. A kin guard named Oren, the same one who had landed in the gully that night, began visiting the station twice a week, always checking on me personally, always making sure the humans around me understood what my presence meant. Other dragons started watching me from the cliffs whenever I walked the trails, not with suspicion anymore, but with something closer to quiet respect. Even the older dragons, the ones who barely acknowledged human workers at all, would tilt their heads slightly whenever I passed, a small gesture that Oren later told me was a sign of recognition among their kind. The hatchling, whose name turned out to be difficult for human mouths to pronounce properly, decided on her own that she would answer to a simpler name. She picked it herself, according to Oren, by responding only when I called her Ash Cinder during one of our early walks together. From that day forward, she followed me everywhere she could. She was still growing, still clumsy on her wings, often tripping over her own tail when she tried to walk beside me instead of flying, but she never once left my side if she could help it. Not everyone on the station was happy about what had happened. Some of the workers whispered that I had broken a rule no human should have broken, no matter the outcome, and that my luck would not hold forever. A man named Grover, who oversaw supply routes for the station, argued loudly with my father one evening, insisting that my actions had put the entire settlement at risk, that dragons were unpredictable, no matter how kind one guard had seemed that night. My father did not back down. He reminded Grover that the entire station was still standing, untouched, and that dragon patrols near our fences had actually become calmer since the night I pulled Ashcinder from under that rock, not more dangerous. The real test came almost a month later, when a group of scouting dragons from a rival clan crossed into Skydalon territory without permission, searching for a nesting ground of their own, after losing theirs to a storm on the far side of the mountain range. Tension rose sharply across the ridge. Dragons gathered in large numbers along the border. Wings spread, voices rising into a low, rolling growl that shook the ground beneath the station. My father ordered everyone inside, locked every door, and told me to stay away from the windows. I did not listen. I slipped out through the side entrance while the adults were busy arguing over emergency plans, and I ran straight toward the ridge, because Ashcinder was still young, still small compared to the grown dragons gathering for what looked like it might turn into open conflict, and I was terrified she would get caught in the middle of it without anyone thinking to protect her. I found her near the edge of the gathering, pressed low to the ground, clearly frightened by the size and noise of the older dragons surrounding her. The rival scouts were circling closer, their eyes scanning the younger dragons with an intensity that made my stomach twist into a knot. I did not think about what I was doing. I ran straight into the open space between the two groups, and stood in front of Ashcinder, arms spread, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The growling stopped almost instantly. Every dragon on that ridge turned to look at me, and for a moment, the whole mountain went completely silent. I remember thinking that silence was somehow louder than any of the growling had been. Orin arrived within seconds, landing hard enough to shake dust from the rocks around us, placing himself between me and the rival scouts without a single word of hesitation. The oldest scout, a lean gray dragon with scars running along one wing, studied me for a long moment, then looked at Orin, then back at me again. "Nest friend," the scout said, and the word carried through the air the same way Orin's voice had that first night, heavy and full of meaning I somehow understood without needing translation. "This is the human your clan speaks of." Orin lowered his head slightly, confirming it, and something shifted in the air around us. The tension that had been building for the last hour seemed to drain away all at once, replaced by something closer to curiosity. The rival scouts studied me carefully, no longer with suspicion, but almost with interest, the way someone studies a story they had only heard secondhand and never expected to see standing in front of them. The talks that followed happened over my head, in a language made of pressure and meaning that I could only partly follow, but by the time the sun started dropping behind the mountains, the rival clan had agreed to share a portion of unclaimed nesting ground on the far ridge, instead of pushing further into Skydalon territory. Nobody was hurt, nothing was destroyed, and somehow, standing in front of a frightened hatchling with my arms spread wide, I had ended up part of the reason the whole thing was resolved without conflict. My father found me afterward, pulled me into a hug so tight it nearly knocked the wind out of me, and did not let go for a long time. He did not scold me for running out during a crisis. He just held on, the way parents do when they realize how close something terrible almost came to happening. Life on the ridge changed after that day. Dragons no longer treated the humans at the station as simple guests tolerated under an old agreement. They began treating us, slowly, cautiously, as something closer to neighbors. Trade between our two peoples improved. Patrols near the fences relaxed even further. My father's survey work became easier, since dragons started guiding him towards safer paths through the mountains, instead of leaving him to guess at dangerous terrain on his own. Ashcinder grew quickly over the following months, her wings finally strong enough to carry her properly, her scales deepening into a rich violet that shimmered under sunlight. She still tripped over her own tail sometimes, still knocked over supply crates when she got too excited, but she never stopped finding her way back to me at the end of each day, curling up near the station entrance until I came outside to greet her. 4 years passed since that first night in the gully. Ashcinder grew from a creature the size of a large dog into something closer to the size of a small transport vehicle, though she still had years of growing left before reaching Orin's full size. She still made that same low, rough sound every single time I came home, the same bond call from that very first night, and every time I heard it, I remembered exactly why I ran toward that sound instead of walking away from it. My father still shakes his head sometimes when he tells the story to new arrivals at the station, still half in disbelief that an 11-year-old boy managed to change the relationship between two entire species in a single night, simply by refusing to ignore a cry for help. I do not think about it in such large terms most of the time. I just remember a scared creature, trapped under broken rock, a sound that would not let me walk away, and a choice that felt obvious in the moment, even though it broke every rule I had ever been told to follow. By dawn that first morning, every dragon on the ridge knew exactly who I was. They still do.